A 1963 case in Arizona forever changed the criminal justice system in the United States. This is the story of Ernesto Miranda.
Welcome to Critical Condition, America at a Crossroads, with your host, David Tatman.
Welcome to Critical Condition, America at a Crossroads. I am your host, David Tatman. As you know, on this show, we've been covering criminal justice issues and criminal justice reform and really a lot of the things that are contributing to a significant increase in crime across our country, across our communities, and it's an epidemic. It's been really, really challenging. So we didn't want to always come up with the one side of the story. So we want to tell you today about the story of Ernesto Miranda. Um, Miranda rights are given to people in the United States upon arrest. Anyone who's watched any sort of U.S. detective show or a crime drama can rattle off the language of Miranda, right? You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. He talks about, this is a speech that must be recited by law enforcement officials when detaining a suspect in order to ensure that they are aware of their right to an attorney and their right against self-incrimination. The rights are also now called the Miranda warning, and they stem from a 1966 Supreme Court case, Miranda versus the state of Arizona. In the original case, the defendant, Ernesto Miranda, a 24-year-old high school dropout with a police record, was accused of, in 1963, of the kidnapping, rape, and robbing of an 18-year-old woman. During the subsequent 2-hour interrogation, Miranda confessed to the crime. Lawyers would later contend that Miranda had not clearly been informed of his rights to have a lawyer and against self-incrimination. And this case was appealed to the United States Supreme Court, and it forever changed criminal procedure in the United States. And so we're going to dig down into that today. So the crime in question occurred in March of 1963 when an 18-year-old girl was forcibly raped by a man as she was walking home from a bus stop after working late at a movie house in Phoenix, Arizona. The attacker dragged her into his car, tied her hands behind her back, and then had her to lay down in the back seat. After driving for about 20 minutes, the man stopped outside the city, raped her, and he demanded that she give him money and then told her to lie down again in the back seat. He then drove her back to the city, dropping her off just a few blocks from her house. So police catch a lead. Days after the reporting of the incident by the Phoenix police, the 18-year-old victim and her cousin noticed a car driving slowly near the same bus stop that she was abducted from and reported the suspicious car's partial license plate to police. Police tracked the sedan down to a 29-year-old Twyla Hoffman who was living in nearby Mesa, Arizona. Hoffman had a live-in boyfriend by the name of Ernesto Miranda. When police showed up at the girlfriend's door, Miranda spoke to them and agreed to go down to the station and appear in a lineup. The victim was unable to immediately identify Mr. Miranda from the four-man lineup at the police station, but Miranda was led to believe otherwise. When Miranda was asked afterwards, "How did I do?" the police told him, "Not too good, Ernie." So Miranda was then questioned for 2 hours without a lawyer. At one point, the detectives brought the victim into the room. One of them one of the police asked Miranda, "Is this the person who you raped?" And Miranda looked at the girl and said, "That's the girl." Miranda eventually offered details about the crime that closely matched the victim's account. He agreed to formalize his confession in a written statement. which he wrote out in his own words. This confession was made with full knowledge of my legal rights, understanding any statement that I make may be used against me. His confession was the sole evidence that he was tried and convicted on by an Arizona court. Miranda's lawyers, who at the time was Alvin Moore, appealed to the Arizona Supreme Court 6 months later, posing the question, was Miranda's statement made voluntarily, and was he afforded all of the safeguards to his rights provided by the Constitution of the United States and the laws and rules of the courts? The Arizona Supreme Court ruled that the April 1965 confession was legitimate and that he had been made aware of his rights. And so Miranda's case caught the eye of an attorney with the Phoenix chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union, and they took this case to the Supreme Court. And so in the brief on behalf of Miranda, Frank wrote, "The day is here to recognize the full meaning of the Sixth Amendment. The Sixth Amendment of the United States Constitution guarantees the rights of criminal defendants, including the right to a lawyer." It was also, the play was made at the Fifth Amendment, which protects a defendant's right from being compelled to become a witness against themselves. Even though Miranda had handwritten his confession under the statement saying that he was fully aware of his legal rights, the lawyers argued that those rights had not been made explicably clear to him, and under duress of, because of the duress of the detainment, they argued his confession should not be deemed admissible. The Supreme Court, under Chief Justice Earl Warren, agreed. In the 5-4 ruling, the Supreme Court reversed the Arizona Supreme Court's decision and declared that the Miranda confession could not be used as evidence in his criminal trial. Warren's 60-page plus written opinion released on June 13, 1966, further outlined police procedure to ensure that defendants are clearly informed of their rights and that when they're being detained and interrogated. So the Miranda warning, the police procedures were encapsulated in the Miranda warning, which police departments nationwide soon began distributing on index cards to their officers so that they would recite them to the suspects. So the Miranda warning reads as follows. You have the right to remain silent. Anything that you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have a right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand these rights as I have just read them to you? With these rights in mind, do you wish to speak to me? So, in a 6-3 ruling in June 23rd, 2022, the Supreme Court said law enforcement officers may not be sued for damages under the federal civil rights law for failing to issue a Miranda warning to suspects. Police are to be shielded from lawsuits for failing to issue Miranda rights, the court said, but a failure to issue the warning can still lead to the exclusion of any comments by the defendant as evidence in a trial. So the retrial of Miranda case was thrown back to the courts. So Miranda's case was remanded in 1967 for a retrial with the confession excluded from evidence and the Supreme Court changing U.S. criminal procedure. Miranda's fate would not be so altered. In his retrial, his ex-girlfriend, Twyla Hoffman, offered testimony against him, revealing that he had told her about his crimes while he was in prison. And in October of 1967, Miranda was convicted and sentenced to 20 to 30 years in prison. Miranda was paroled in December of 1975, but just over a month later, on January 31st, 1976, he was stabbed to death in a Phoenix bar fight. Officers would detain the two acquaintances who were with Miranda that night for questioning before asking each of them about the evening. The officers recited the Miranda warning in Spanish. Both men were released and questioned. So I wanted to tell you this little story about Miranda, and I wanted to also mention to you that in the Supreme Court case, there were other defendants who were listed because there were other cases that were similar around the United States at the time. And you can do your research and check this out. But, we kind of have had input from some of our social media posts and from some of the direct mails that maybe we were too far to the right on the criminal justice reform thing. And I wanted to share Miranda with you because I think Miranda is an incredible case and is really, really important because it protects citizens, right? Your constitutional rights to not self-incriminate, your constitutional right to have an attorney present during questioning is critically important. It's quintessentially the United States separates us from so many other countries because we have Miranda rights and other rights, but it is also something that makes police and law enforcement have to work a little harder. And to be honest with those who are accused of crimes, I think that Miranda helps prevent people who are innocent of crimes from being found guilty because of the pressure of what an interrogation can bring. And so I wanted to bring that story to you. So now, when you're watching your crime detective story and when you're watching movies and you hear you have the right to remain silent, you will know where it came from and you will know why. So again, that's our show for this time. I wanted to encourage you to follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at the Pelican Brief 225. That's at the Pelican Brief 225. You can also follow us on YouTube, and that is also at the Pelican Brief 225. And then finally, you can email us at criticalconditionshow@gmail.com, and that's criticalconditionshow@gmail.com. Like, share, and follow. If you have a good take, we'll mention it on the show. If you have a great take, you will likely be a guest. Thank you for being with us. And until next time, this is Critical Condition.
Critical Condition, America at a Crossroads is an off-script production.